I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm, where today I'll be responding to Russell Brand's interview of Krystal called Should We Hijack Political Parties or Start a Revolution? I'm going to be looking at Russell's intro, where he talks about starting an adjacent nation. And I'm going to be responding to that from the last section of my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, where I call it Regeneration Nation and talk about the kind of adjacent nation that I would form. Now, in Russell's intro, he says that in his adjacent nation, he would have no mortgages, no taxes, and presumably no student debt. I say, why not just throw in free pizza delivery and live in our parents' basement? Because even though I'm being glib, that's the kind of thing that's leading towards. It's not leading towards a system of reciprocity where we take responsibility for not only ourselves, but for each other. If we were to go from this system where we are really lap cats who are being fed by someone else's slave labor in the world to being entirely self-reliant, we would starve within 3 weeks. So we need to figure out a way in which we can gradually ramp up our self-reliance. I think that capitalism has intentionally created what I call the juvenilization of society. We've been kept as permanent adolescents who really have no idea how to feed ourselves, how to take care of ourselves, how to build things. And so there are a lot of skills that we're going to have to relearn. And I think we're going to have some kind of system that rewards us for that, while at the same time making us a little less dependent, but still keeping that other system in place so that we can survive long enough to learn how to be self-reliant. So in my book, I look at 3 different things that are used. So what I say is that what any society needs in order to govern itself, and money is the control of your own labor. It's a means of organizing labor. So in order to take control of the money and be able to organize your own labor, you need to have debt plus tax plus some amount of cash so that you can then form some kind of system to be able to have people trade that in order to get things that you can't produce yourself. So if you absolve all debts, essentially what you're doing is you're stopping the whole system. In part 4 of my book, I look at systems thinking. And part of systems thinking is that you have metaphors for how you want things to work. So I look at how to reimagine money. And I say in a chapter called What If Money Was No Object? How can we look at money as something else and decide how we want it to work? So one of the things I look at is money as the blood of the body politics. And in that, what the heart does is it brings that blood in and it fills it full of oxygen, full of energy, and then it pumps it to whatever part of the body is using it, not just needs it, but is using it. So if you're able to use more energy, you should get more energy. And so that system keeps everything circulating. It makes sure that there's always enough. But if you don't have any way that money comes back to your government, then essentially you've stopped the heart. You've made it so the heart doesn't pump. I think this was the mistake that was made by Fidel Castro in looking at Cuba, that when Cuba was redesigned, what he did is say, okay, if you live in a rental, that rental is now yours. You have permanent ownership of that rental for as long as you're there. And what that did was create a system where there was no circulation. that there wasn't an incentive. There was no way to trade. There was no way to be able to keep things going, to have some reciprocity between things that you did that served the community and the things that you got from that were already there, because housing is something that's been created already. And the mortgage comes from death grip, mortgage. It's not technically true, but it's close enough and descriptive enough. So in the hands of bankers, that mortgage is that death grip. But if that mortgage was a means of rewarding service to the community, then it would become something that showed that reciprocity, something that could be used in order to organize labor in a way where we were able to do things for each other and start learning how to produce again. At one point in the interview, Krystal talks about populism, and she compares the populism of Bernie Sanders to the populism of the 1930s, which was a farmer movement. I have done a lot of research on that early populism because I was part of the Grange movement, and the Grange was instrumental in that movement. They had a brilliant way of disseminating knowledge and being able to organize, and also they had something called the Non-Partisan League. And the Non-Partisan League was very different than bipartisan. What they said is, if you support our policies, we will support you, no matter what party you belong to. And so they decided what the policy should be, and then they looked for the best candidate. So that, I think, is something we should really be learning from when we look at it. But the populism of the 1930s was also very different than Bernie Sanders because they were all producers. And so what they were looking for was a way of being able to organize their labor. They weren't looking for the products of someone else's labor. So what they wanted was, it was the silver movement. And when you look at The Wizard of Oz, we've lost the historical context of that the slippers were not ruby slippers, they were silver. And the silver was what was plentiful. And what they said is, we have the labor, we have the people who need things, all we need is that conduit. We just need this artificial substance called money that would enable us to be able to bring our labor and get it to the people who need these things. And in The Wizard of Oz, the Cowardly Lion represented the presidential candidate, William Jennings Bryan. What he stood for was a platform of monetizing silver. And so with that platform, he was not as strong as they wanted him to be and ended up losing to FDR. But what he did was push FDR into the New Deal. The New Deal had some of the characteristics of Bryan's plan, but what it didn't do was create a new form of money. So it created this way of kicking the can down the road. It took that debt and just pushed it, rather than creating a system of money where we could have all of that employment for things that we wanted as a community, but we weren't then going to continue our debts to the bankers. When I look at Bernie Sanders' campaign, what he is talking about is really socialism. It's not the same sort of populism because it's a consumer solution. That what it says is, we get free stuff. We get free healthcare, we get free education. So let's look at how that would work in practice. If you do that, say with free education, you absolve all student debts, the first thing that happens is no one is ever going to loan to students again because they know that they'll never get repaid. And so you're going to have to create some kind of system where everybody is putting money in to pay for the teachers. And then you're going to have some central authority who says, well, who's really qualified to be a teacher? And what kinds of things do we want to pay for them to teach? Do we want them to pay for them to teach philosophy? Do we want to let just anybody take that class? Do we want to pay just anybody to teach that class? And so you still have to have this central authority that's making decisions. In my system, what I do is I take the debt and the tax and I say, okay, well, I know that we're going to have this much money coming in. And since we've taken over the banks, we have all of the community money that is now being generated to be able to repay those debts. So debts are not paid in dollars necessarily. What they're paid in is community, what I call carrots, because I need a symbol that isn't in use right now on the keyboard, and the little carrot sign also gives me the chance to make some fun puns about carrots and not sticks. And so if we have a community currency called carrots, a digital currency, then that means we can take any student loans, we can take any kind of mortgage debt, and we can push that into the community in the form of money that we hand out that maybe can only be used for certain purposes. So if I were to do that, let's say that in my town of Santa Cruz, that we have $800 coming in that we know because the cost of living is really high here. And so we know that we've got $800 per person that's going to be coming into our government. So we can take that and turn it into carrots and say, okay, 200 of that we're going to put out there for locally grown food, locally produced food. And so every person is going to have every month 200 carrots that they can use for any form of locally produced food. And now we say, okay, we're going to have 200 a month for education. But that education can be anyone that you want to learn from. And then I would do it for well care. I wouldn't do it for what we call health care, which is really sick care and is often dying care. Most money is spent in the last 6 months of someone's life. And so we have a focus on end of life and not the quality of life in between. What I would do is say, if you want to offer chiropractic, you want to offer acupuncture, massage, dance classes, anything that you want to call that, you can be well care, child care, elder care, and then you can use 200 carrots a month towards that. And then my last one would be home improvements, that whether you're in a rental or in a home, I think all of the places that we live should be continually improved. And so maybe there's another 200 a month that goes towards that. So if I'm someone looking for a way to make a living, I can make a living that is equal to the cost of being in that community by doing ordinary things, by things like cooking food or growing food, taking care of kids, providing different services, counseling, teaching, all the different things that I might be interested in, fixing up things, painting, which you guys can tell I like by looking at the backgrounds in my home. So that would give us a way of creating reciprocity. I also do think, which I think Russell mentions, that everyone needs to be involved in producing their own food. We need to have communal ways that we're all learning how to go to places where we're working together, not just backyards, which is isolating and you can't do it. So we need ways that we can be in neighborhoods working together and going to the outskirts where there is land and being able to be more involved in food production. What that would give us, and I'm speaking specifically to Russell here, it would give us the ability to take the best of ourselves and give it away. That ideas should belong to everyone. They're not really possessions. That when we have an idea, it becomes stronger and better the more people steal it. So having a way of regenerating our self-reliance and giving the best of ourselves to whoever wants to take it, that's my dream for a Regeneration Nation and for my own adjacent nation. Thank you. If you're intrigued and would like to go deeper into these ideas, here's another video on a related theme. And if you'd like to delve into this entire area, here's a playlist. Thank you, and I would love it if you would subscribe.